Welcome to the AI Lyceum, where we explore how AI is impacting the world. I created it in homage to Aristotle's Lyceum in Athens, which explored various subjects. I'm Samraj Matharu, certified AI ethicist and visiting lecturer at Durham University. Each episode, I speak with leaders who have unique ideas or tools around AI for us to learn from. So today I'm joined by Tina Rostin, who's founder of Gainable AI and is an AI educator working at the intersection of biomedical science, education, and ethics. She's a stem cell biologist and bioethics lecturer whose work now focuses on how AI changes judgment, assessment, and decision making, particularly in science and education. So she's been recognized by the ASU and GSV Top Women in AI in 2025, Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert 2026, and has been invited to conversations at the University of Oxford and OpenAI focused on education and responsible AI usage. She was recently interviewed by CNN International on how teachers can never be replaced by AI. So welcome, Tina. And to start us off, you went from studying stem cells to speaking at OpenAI's headquarters. So what was it about ChatGPT's release that made a biologist like you think, I need to drop everything and work on this?
Thank you. Love that question. And thanks for having me. It was mainly in the beginning when I was bringing it into my classes, doing experimentation and realizing how fascinating these experimentations were. Students were really enjoying it. And then on top of that, I was originally in a place where a lot of AI in teaching was not super supported. So I had to move to a other department. And then during that process, many other departments were reaching out and asking for help with AI. And therefore, it just lent itself to other types of work, which was advising on AI and doing AI ethics and consulting. And it picked up and, next thing I knew, there was just a lot of requests for how we're doing it. We did early experimentation in the classroom is where it all began in the bioethics class.
Nice. And you must know AlphaFold by Google DeepMind, right? Because that was a Nobel Prize winning feat for Demis, DeepMind, right?
Yeah, that was actually one of our lectures in my computational bio class was talking about AlphaFold and how it's different from other prediction models and just really getting students excited about using AI and science and how great experiments were some great experiments were co-designed with AI, people that did scripting, companies that emerged from using AI. And yeah, just really exciting stuff and lots of students coming to see how they can, have a career in this post-Gen AI world.
And there is a lot of challenges, aren't there? There are a lot of challenges around students getting jobs at the university. So how can it create jobs as well as help people do their current jobs? Because there's a lot of talk about agents replacing humans. So for students, they must be very stressed out at the moment, thinking about how they can kickstart their career.
Yeah, and that was another thing that lent itself to this type of work is trying to help, like thinking, well, how would my student navigate this world with this post AI world? And then it started off with seeing what job opportunities were available. So every other week I would bring a job description. Like when we had time at the end of the class, we'd lend it to job description, this posting, what is it looking for? And why is this emerging? And then what you need to do to be able to fit this posting. So we started off with asking these types of questions, and then that ended up becoming a graduate course where I ended up teaching at a different university. And this course was just focused on preparing students for jobs with AI. So these were all graduate students, and they wanted to know, how can we build AI agents? How can we still be relevant in this post AI world? And it was just fascinating.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? Between they call it human intelligence and artificial intelligence. I think there's a big difference between us and AI is because we have wisdom, so we have life experience, and we have the ability to contextualize a scenario, whereas AI is a model. It doesn't have the actual real world experience that we have. It's a model because it's a representation. So where do you see it going in the next 5 years or so?
That's a really good question. I think as many of my colleagues have mentioned and then because I read stuff all the time, is it could go in different directions depending on which one we feed, right? So kind of like um I think depending on, if you're one of those people that are like actively promoting supporting the ban AI movement, we're still like some people are still talking about banning AI, then that's only going to hold some other people back while the technology keeps advancing in other countries. And if we're supporting the um, the pro AI, where we're trying to use a lot of AI to do different experiments. I'm sure you saw the one this week with Moltbook, right? I don't know if you heard about that one with AI agents it's a social media for AI agents to interact with each other, and really it's just LLMs um, interacting in a room. Um, some people might say that's a really cool experiment, and some might say, okay, no, this is terrible. We need to stop this. This is just fueling the dead internet theory. So the depending on which one of these we end up supporting as a community, I think in 5 years it could go in any direction. It's kind of like some people call it like a jagged edge, where like some things advance, some things are still slow, and I'm really surprised just in the past year, like, compared to last year, how image generators are so much better, how reasoning models are so different. And but mostly I'm fascinated about the advances in science. And yeah.
Yeah, I saw Moltbook actually, and someone just posted on LinkedIn, and it's like a video of someone's terminal where the agent's making like 80,000 new agents. So it seems a bit crazy. And some people were saying that it's actually human beings on there as well, even though it says that it can't be human beings. So just for those who are listening, Moltbook, MOLT book, is a social media platform where AI agents can apparently interact with each other. It's like Reddit, and there are apparently no humans on there. And there's been the creation of this religion called Christopher,ism and all sorts of crazy stuff. So apparently, it went from one agent to 150,000 in 72 hours. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is insane. And I've actually been a big believer in simulations for testing how AI actually thinks. And AI can't just think, like an agent shouldn't just think alone, it should think in a group, because if we're to embed these into society, I think it's good to do that. So, yeah, what was your initial reaction to this sort of test, and have you had any thoughts on these sort of tests? Because I know that Google DeepMind did a similar sort of theory or simulation of making their predictive model or AI play games, which I've seen on a thinking game on Amazon, which is quite a good documentary.
Yeah, no, I instantly my first reaction was I was looking at, okay, yes, this is interesting for science because, there last year, I don't know if you heard, there was one of my colleagues at Stanford put together a AI conference that was just for AI agents with AIs. These LLM models were all submitting their own proposal, and there was this conference that was just from AI for AI. And it was fascinating because um, after a while, a lot of the information generated was nonsense, but some of the information was very helpful, and it helped them come up with new hypotheses. And now many reviewers suggested, well, what would this look like if we had both human and AI at these conferences, and how would that experiment work out? So it kind of reminded me of that conference where no human was allowed and it was just AI. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just writing it down actually for my notes so I can ask it later on. But that's crazy having an AI conference. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think it was. again, it was someone who had worked at Harvard before, and then they moved to Stanford, and their focus was on, the capabilities of the reasoning models in terms of like what's technically possible for science. And what they did was, again, I think I posted a link to it on LinkedIn. You can read the full description. It was just to see how it can advance science if there was a conference just for AI. And like I think 40% of the information they got was not useful, but I think they still got some very interesting proposals. And and I think this is so relevant now because we're seeing a spike in submissions to conferences because people have access to LLMs, and we're seeing a spike in like AI generated words. So I thought this was a really interesting experiment because now they're saying no humans, only AI doing this. And then the Moltbook came along this week, and so I did a poll for my audience on LinkedIn, and it was split down the middle. It was split down the middle in terms of what percentage found it fascinating for science, and then the other percentage were saying, "Oh no, this is nonsense." I can see their point to some extent why it would seem nonsense, and you know, um, the dead internet theory where everything is just AIs talking to each other. But then also another big concern was security risks. And this was something we all kind of predicted where, if you're letting your agent with your API keys, just run loose in the environment, some people um, had their information exposed, or at least that was some of the things I saw in my feed where um, there were some concerns for sure about breaches with, you know, some bad actors, right? And that's always the problem with like anywhere you're giving out your information, you can assume if there's bad actors there, you shouldn't be there at all. Like many would say, this is an argument against using Moltbook entirely. And again, I'm not pro Moltbook or anti Moltbook. I'm just looking at it from a science perspective, and I can see why everybody has good good reason for their answers, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah. And going on to the science angle, science is all about the word science comes from the word scientia in Greek, I think, meaning to know. So it's all about understanding and having the appropriate context of the scenario and establishing truth, in my opinion. So people are all using AI in businesses and they want to add value, but in a scientific approach, how would you recommend businesses use AI and measure the success of it?
thank you. Well, I think that's a really good question because science and businesses, like, they don't often like think parallel science. You experiment, you fail, you try again, you come up with a hypothesis. Businesses are usually, just about making money and like being able to like get revenue. So, it's what can business owners learn from scientists? A lot of companies are adopting AI to add value, but again, scientists are asking, what decision does this support? And so I think they could use some of the findings. And what I'm seeing every week on LinkedIn is that papers come out. There's these hot viral takes that go viral, and it's not really the nuance of the story. Then you break down the paper, and there's some really good things that are good takeaways for businesses in terms of measurement. It shouldn't be about like efficiency or speed. So one thing I see a lot in the AI space is the metric that's used is about saving time. And I don't know if you saw this study, was it like 2 weeks ago, about um, how saving time, that metric really benefits the CEOs on the top, but not, let's say, the people in the bottom of the chain, because for them, if they're using AI to save time, all that means is they're adding more things to their plate that they previously weren't. So they're not like it's not like if they have a 9 to 5 job, they go home at like 12, they're still doing other things. And now they might say, well, now we have a higher workload. But for the person on top of that business, that's really good news because their company is like really moving forward. So it really depends on what they're what we're measuring. And again, its success shouldn't always be about speed or efficiency, but it could be about improved accuracy. I think that's very valuable for businesses, better risk awareness, and really just making better informed decisions. I know for the past 3 years, since the faculty that I work with and the students and the people that I advise, they're coming back to me telling me that this is not just about saving time, but they're also making better decisions, getting better answers, and finding out ways to make AI work for them uh, rather than just automating things.
Yeah, because automation isn't necessarily AI. So not all automation is AI, but AI can be automated, and there's a big difference between the two. A lot of people are implementing workflows, but workflows are not necessarily AI. You can just have a simple logic, so a logic workflow. So you have decision trees which have been around for a long time as well, and people don't always remember that AI has been around since 1950. I think it was 1956. The Dartmouth Conference was where it first originated, right? And so it's been around for 70 years, and we had an AI winter for a long time. And now we have an AI summer, I'd call it, where or spring, because spring means new things. So we're in an AI spring and it's exploding. But there is a question of ethics as well. So, how do you define the difference between morals and ethics? And do you believe that there's AI ethics? Because a lot of people are saying there is no such thing as AI ethics, but I disagree. I think that ethics is a system that a decision is governed by. So I think that there is both human ethics and AI ethics, because if we're creating another intelligence that's different to us, we must have our own. We must give it its own framework, at least to adhere to.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely, you mentioned a lot of great points there, talking about, uh, decision trees. So, like, and again, if there's time, I'd love to talk about some of the frameworks that I implemented with decision trees. Um, and yes, generative AI, like AI itself has been around since the 1950s. And as you mentioned, but generative AI is more of a recent thing, the past couple of years. And again, I'm just kind of like going through all the things that you asked about. There is also obviously a big distinction between morals and ethics. Morals are more like a personal cultural belief. Some people whose morals, right? But ethics, on the other hand, are kind of more like structured in a way that kind of govern the decision making in scientific or institutional context. And so, of course, AI ethics is important, but also someone might say, "Well, whose ethics are we talking about here?" So, it ultimately AI systems are going to influence the decisions within the world that we're in, but it comes down to I mean, we're all biased in some way, everyone is, who was behind that. And so if we're creating systems that act or recommend or prioritize people or exclude people, it has to operate within an explicit framework. And so we already do this in other places like medicine and research, but I don't think that it's going to replace or affect human ethics in a way that I think it's more going to be complementary, and, um, and it really just means that we need to have governance, more AI governance rather than, prioritize speed or profit or convenience. What I really love from conferences I've seen in Europe, I've recently one of my proposals was accepted for the International Institute of Safe AI Ethics in Paris with UNESCO, and, what I see in, like, my European colleagues is there's so much more focus on AI ethics and governance over there, and I think that's great because we definitely need to have, more guidelines, more frameworks, and that's how I think we can build a better future with AI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I've seen your framework. Let me just find it. It is here somewhere in my questions. It is, I can't find it now, but you have a framework somewhere. My
It,
framework I use is called the Socratic AI Framework, and it's got 3 questions, which is from Socrates. Is it useful? So necessary. Is it necessary and useful for business and for the world? Yes or no? And there's various different ways you measure it. GDP contributions, profit margins in businesses. If people have more morale after using it, time saved, for example, productivity. The next one is it good? So does it do things well? And does it do things to a good standard? And is it kind, which is also good? So morally there. Then is it true? Does it give you the true answers? Is it usually right? And is it consistent? Because truth and consistency go hand in hand. Because truth takes a long time to build, but then it can crash in a second, which means it takes consistency to be built. But then one inconsistent act can just kind of get rid of it. So that's my framework, but I'll let you explain yours now.
Thank you. I love that framework, and it's more relevant to what we were just discussing. My framework is about how to use AI for critical thinking and improve. Um, it's more about teaching. The one that you described is excellent for navigating this world with yeah, what you just asked about businesses and ethics. So I don't know if you want me to go deeper with what the framework is about, or I can tell you why and I came up with it.
Yeah, yeah, both. Like, why did you come up with a framework? Because frameworks are really important, and I think they're underutilized or underappreciated as well a lot of times. Because it seems to me sometimes that we think that just doing stuff is really important, but it's actually the thinking behind it that makes it different. And there's a good quote, isn't there? I think Einstein said, if you asked me to chop down a tree in 10 hours, I'd spend 8 hours or 9 hours thinking about how I'm going to chop it down or something, and then 1 hour doing it or something. I don't know exactly what the quote is, but it's a similar one. And there's also another story. There were two guys asked to use an axe to chop wood, and one of the guys was taking breaks like every hour or so. And after like a period of time, they compared how much wood they chopped, and the guy who took breaks was better, and he did loads more. And the other guy said, "Well, you took so many breaks. How the hell did you do it?" He goes, "Oh, sharpening my axe." So sometimes it's about doing things more critically and having actually a thoughtful approach to it and strategy rather than just going through something without thinking. So that's why I think a framework's great. So it'd be great if you can explain, like, yeah, where it came from, what it means, who should use it, and whoever's listening, why should they use it, and what sort of tests have you done with it so far?
Awesome. Thank you. So it began in the classroom. As you know, we talked about when ChatGPT came out, it's really good at like the assumption was it was really good at um, generating, let's say, a chapter of a book or generating an answer to write this dissertation. And so when you think about what's important in education, a lot of people are familiar. I don't know if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. So, all it is it was generated in it was made in the 1950s by Professor Bloom, where he proposed this idea of learning and how it goes up this ladder from understanding to evaluating and then going up further up to creating. And so, uh, and I was going over the step by step understanding, remembering, and so forth. And what AI does, it already goes to that final step, the top of the ladder, and it can already create something for you. So when you're implementing that in your syllabus, then how do you have your students do assessments if AI can create it for them? And so I started calling it unblooming, which was about the unstructuring of the Bloom's taxonomy. And instead of having a triangle or a reverse triangle, many proposed we could just reverse it and it would work fine, which it does in like some writing classes and STEM classes. We do need that to be more, in my experience and colleagues that we worked with, it worked better as a circle where the goal was now problem solving and not climbing up the ladder or down the ladder. And so I called it Unblooms, and then to add to this Unblooms, I also added a metacognitive thinking scale, which was about students not just reflecting about their work, but also going over metacognition and thinking about their own thinking, which is another reason why the Bloom's model is a circle and not a triangle, because learning is recursive and it's not linear. So that was why I proposed it, and it quickly, wherever I presented, it seemed to have a couple of, well, more than a couple. Like I just experimented this with hundreds of faculty and different workshops and different schools and collaborations, and really all it's to summarize, it's giving you a structure and how to grade the thinking and not just the output. And then when you say grade the thinking, a lot of people say, "Okay, great, let's grade the thinking. How do we do it? Here's a step by step." And I'm happy to share a link to a presentation I've done, or a link to some work that was recently accepted and peer reviewed at a conference. And yeah, I'm really excited for how fast this stuff is taken off.
Yeah, it's really clever. I've just looked at Bloom's taxonomy. I remember seeing it in school. So it's got 6 stages: create, evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, remember, which I like. And I like how you put it into a cycle. Most diagrams are not cyclic enough. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle, but that's a bit different. You mentioned that you believe in metacognition and you want to improve thinking, but how do we measure thinking? Because you can't go into my brain and check it, but when we have AI, we can check the GPU's compute used. We can look at inference. We can look at different metrics. But when I'm thinking, unless you're using a monitor, I think it's called an EEG monitor on my head, you can't see how I'm thinking better. So do you think we need to have these sort of EEGs to validate all of these changes in how we teach people?
Oh, I really love this question too. I mean, you're all asking all the great questions about metacognition. This kind of reminds me of that paper that was the MIT paper last year about the cognitive offloading brain rot. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. You're smiling, right? The EEG. And that paper was also widely misinterpreted too, where, yes, there was some good aspects, like, to the paper, that it was a preprint, but then a lot of people were taking it out of context and showing these EEG waves that you're talking about are actually just your brain rotting, which, again, I'm not gonna go on a tangent and talk about that, but yeah, thinking has never, been measured by directly observing the brain. In education and science, and I'm pretty sure even in psychology, we've always measured thinking indirectly, through evidence, right? Through evidence of reasoning. So what we do is we infer what cognition is happening from what people can explain, how they can justify, how can they revise things, not from the actual activity or like you mentioned, the EEG scans and things like that. So metacognition, I love this because it's not about a like a raw cognitive load or brain signals, but it's really about awareness of your own thinking and being able to articulate why you chose this path, what recognize the uncertainty, notice the errors, and kind of adapt what your strategy is. And so when AI enters the learning space or teaching space, what's really interesting is, um, like, now, how do you think about your thinking when you've just pressed a button and you have an output? So we can't really measure humans in the way that, like you mentioned, measuring machines with GPU usage or like token counts, right? But what it does is, like, it gives us new ways to, like, um, bring about thinking. So what my point of view is that, how can we have students explain and justify their decisions? How do they go back and revise it? How do they compare the alternatives? So this metacognitive scale that I presented last year at OpenAI, it was just about that. So it started off with, like, if we put AI aside and the student just generates an output before they even hit a button, what would that look like? Now compare that with what AI's output. How is your thinking different from AI's answer? What does AI constantly do differently? And so really students during this process, they gain confidence in their own answers, and they realize, yeah, AI always writes like this, or AI always does images like this, but I can do this. And so like if you go through that scale and then in the final stage, you either like create something or you're able to uh, bring something new. It's really interesting to see when students are going through that productive struggle. So failure is not something to be ashamed of. Like I want my students to like just know why they were wrong, and that's pretty much like one of the ways we assess. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I think understanding how to think properly is really important. There is there is a challenge though in science of this thing called determinism. So there's obviously the big philosophical question of whether we are born, if we were brought into, if we were brought to life by something called God, right? And God determines the rules of the universe, that we have free will versus determinism. So free will is we can choose everything we want to do. Determinism is we're boxed into certain sets of rules that we can do things within that gives us certain outcomes. So my question to you is, AI tools have something called interpretability. And actually I thought of interpretability, and then I actually didn't know that it was an actual term. I just kind of thought, oh, I'm going to call it interpretability because it's interpreting what I'm asking it. And then I see online that all these experts are using it, so I'm pretty happy that I kind of think in that way. But interpretability to me is like when I ask it a question, what should I eat for dinner tonight? It can give me millions of different answers. Whereas if I say what's one plus one, it's probably going to give you two generally, unless it's a really bad AI tool. So in science, we need actual outcomes to happen. We need someone to either, if they're not operated on, they might die. And then if they're operated on, hopefully they'll survive because they've been operated on. That's determinism, right? Either this or this. In an interpretable world with AI being used, what risks are there of us using these tools and it not leading to the outcomes that we want because there's so much subjection in the way that it interprets the question, but also interprets how to answer the question?
Wow, that's a also, I mean, these are all super, super important. Like I used to have a whole like lecture about like deterministic tools like calculators, and you're absolutely right to connect this with interpretation. And I feel that in many scientific domains, like for example, medicine, we definitely need determinism. I mean, science is all about reproducibility and accuracy. And certain things must always have certain outcomes. Otherwise, the system will fail. You can't just have like a patient go somewhere and then kind of have a creative response to this. Like, this is not about creativity at all. It becomes risky, I think, right when we're trying to like add probabilistic interpretation, and that will cause um I guess casual certainty. So I'm sure you're familiar with probabilistic models, and like you were saying, when you say what should I eat for dinner, the answers could be broad, right? Anything could be good enough. But when you're asking, oh, should this patient be operated on, is this molecule going to be toxic, or is this particular protein going to lead to this particular phenotype? We're not no longer in that subjective space. And so we're going to have real world consequences. So as you mentioned, the risk is not that AI can interpret, but the fact that it can interpret without certain boundaries. Like there's papers coming out. There's one this morning about, these, like the longer it thinks sometimes, the more it will like may be able to may go off track. And so large models might be optimized to give you plausible responses, but they won't necessarily guarantee truth. And truth is something really important we talk about when, like they're not all LLMs are not optimized for that truth. And they can sound really confident. We all know this. And this is why I always say, like, you shouldn't use AI for, let's say some people use it for for interviews. I don't know if you heard that one, right? And that like always gives them an answer, even though when the answer should be, I don't know this. And AI will never tell you, I don't like Like it'll just give you something, even if it doesn't know this. And and so in deterministic systems, I think ambiguity is dangerous sometimes when an AI will introduce that ambiguity um, in how sometimes you prompt it, you can get one answer or a totally different answer at the output level. Um, when how those probabilities are turned into recommendations, like, let's say, I'm sure you've seen lots of people use ChatGPT for I know we say ChatGPT, but Claude or others for, medical diagnosis, right? There's 3 weeks' time they have to wait to see a doctor here, especially in the States. We don't have the NHS here. You would have to wait a long time to get hold of a doctor, and lots of people will just, like, say, "Well, let me just ask ChatGPT." And 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 there's nothing wrong with, like, asking it for generic things sometimes, but I feel that if it's a super sensitive thing, especially in medicine, you definitely want to get a doctor's advice because it's a very serious thing to ask sometimes. So we being for having it to be interpretable is not enough. Okay, we need it to be um, we need it to be able to be able to calibrate. We need to be able to validate, and more importantly, I think we need to have some accountability.
If doctors start using AI tools to diagnose and to give a prognosis and to give particular drugs, it'll be interesting to see what people think of that. And yeah, instead of going to a GP in the future, you might go to GPT. So from GP to GPT, just add a T on the end, and you've got a doctor who's actually an AI thing. So that could be the future where we're moving from general practitioners to generative pre-trained transformer models. But I doubt that GPTs are going to be the future because a lot of people are saying that there's better ways of building things in terms of AI that's going to happen. So I think it's just the first step of where we're going to go in the next 500 years. I mean, there's plenty of time to do bigger things, but who knows if in 500 years that we're going to be where like how we are represented right now is going to be a very different world. So, what sort of films have you seen that you think are representative of the future we're going to go into? Because I've seen Ex Machina, I've seen iRobot, I've seen The Matrix, I think I've seen The Terminator, right? So there's so many different outcomes that people have kind of prophesized that are really extreme, by the way. I just want to hear your thoughts on which ones you think are the most real and you think we can probably move into by 2100. It doesn't have to be like really dystopian. It's just more about the technology involved. So like robots with real brains and Terminator is like there's a robot that morphs into anything it wants and stuff like that. So where do you think that we can be this century?
Oh, I love this because I use film examples all the time with my students about so they get the idea, the concern. But sci-fi movies, they always have this thing where it's like exaggerated one part of it, and then there's like some protagonists and yeah, Ex Machina, I can't remember how many years ago I saw that. I was and The Matrix and The Terminator and all those. I think all of these are interesting, but don't feel that the future is going to be anything like this violent takeover or this rebellion that we see in those movies. I mean, every day something happens in the news with like uh, AI that someone will say, "Oh, this is more like Black Mirror." I don't know if you've watched any Black Mirror episodes of like, something the friend thing on your necklace or the one where like there's a dating app and there's people's agents talking to each other and then telling them this is the person they need to date. I think there was an episode like that where right where they're the agents meet each other before the humans ever do, and then they decide these two are going to be compatible. I Those are good ones. I think unlike these movies where you see this evil robot going around, which I mean that still might happen with some companies, but I think it's more like I don't know if you watched the latest Mission Impossible with, what was it called? The Entity, where it's not like a person, and it's just like this AI system that already is doing surveillance, and it's already monitoring things around the world, and so what's his name? Ethan Hawke or whatever his I think Tom Cruise's character, I forgot his name. Um, he's not actually running from one person. It's like AI that exists everywhere, and he's being surveilled, and it's kind of biased against him, and it's kind of like everywhere he goes, like they can listen to him on it is a little bit sci-fi, but I found that interpretation of, AI to be more realistic because, this is the one that has access to all the nuclear weapons. This is the one that is, like, omnipresent, and it's not like this Arnold Schwarzenegger versus and by the way, that also reminds me of, The Terminator reminds me of AI companions and how, students like, have this thing with the AI companion. It's really meant it's anthropomorphized to have, see for you to give it, like, human, um, uh, behavior or human treatment, but it's still the AI at the end of the day. It's not going to be like the friendly Terminator, and it's more going to be like, in my view, like the entity. But if that's all if it goes wrong. I'm still optimistic that we can do so many great things for AI in healthcare and do so many great things for AI in medicine. Like we see these discoveries with DeepMind every week with, AlphaGenome that came out last week. Um, so many great things being done at MIT and other schools. And I'm actually doing, this a workshop series for our UCLA Health this year, and this is about helping medical students make better decisions with AI. And so I'm very much an optimist, cautious optimist in that area. But you're asking about sci-fi movies, and they always have like this really negative thing. So I'm just answering both. Yeah. But yeah, it could go either way. I mean, let's be honest, like the world is different from what it was like 10 years ago and 10 years before that, and it's always been taking these turns, so
Yeah, it's crazy. I was actually listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was talking about escape velocity of people who they might uh every year that passes they might actually age like less than the year older.
yeah.
So they will always be alive because they're aging less than the years that go by. I think that could be a thing that people become, you know, superhuman in a way. I'm just reading the article about AlphaGenome. It's by Google again. They're just too smart. So deep learning model that decodes the regulatory effects of DNA changes. So it looks at basically wow. It looks at basically looking at predicting genome tracks across diverse cell types and wow, like predicting diseases and stuff, right? That's basically in a nutshell. Swiss Army knife for exploring non-coding DNA. I'm not as much into biology. I haven't done it since like 14, 15 years ago. But maybe you could explain it to me.
Oh, well, I'll be honest, I haven't fully read the entire paper. It was just released this week, and I don't have, like, the full but I know it was along the lines of what you were saying, with, predicting d wait, to be clear, I don't think it was, like, just predicting diseases, entirely. I think, I have to go back to that post. It was about, I think it had to do with RNA-seq and helping with RNA-seq data. And so, like, if a single letter in DNA changes, like, what happens next? And usually, most people think it's like, okay, a gene has a defect. Now the protein has a defect. Now we have a disease. And that's where I think I saw some viral takes on it, and I knew that can't be it because that's a really small part of the story. It's not the full picture. And I think, um, what might be missed is that only 2% of your DNA, really codes for proteins, and the other, 98% is more like regulatory, and so it controls which genes are turned on and which genes are turned off, and that's just the non-coding DNA, and I don't wanna, like, drift this away from your audience to make it about DNA, but from what I understood, it can take a DNA sequence and um, maybe predict what it would look like with a small mutation, and then find out, how that mutation affects gene regulation in different cell types. So that was the novelty, because instead of like saying, "Oh, we have like this defect," I think it would be more like, um, now that we have this and it suppresses this other thing, maybe it can change the person's immune response. It's kind of like that. But that was my understanding. I didn't really read the full paper, but that was still pretty significant, right?
Yeah, it says here the early adopters of AlphaGenome. The researchers used the tool as an independent cross-check, confirming that genes implicated by sleep loss were especially active in their neurons of interest, just as their early analysis of gene expression data from brain tissue predicted. So AlphaGenome succeeded in cross-validation. That's insane. So that, like, it feels like Google are heading towards the health sphere, and OpenAI also has released partnerships, I think, with Aura and a couple of other companies, right? Can't remember who it was with. It was with someone. I can't remember if it was with Aura. It was definitely with someone recently, but it seems like that AI can be a personal health assistant for us. And I see the main benefit of AI being to predict and have foresight rather than just insight. Right now, we're using it for a lot of insight, but insight is looking at the past. Foresight is predicting the future, and then mixing foresight with a post foresight insight is how you get the best outcomes, right?
Yeah, yeah. One of the one of the things we did early in my class, like 2023, when ChatGPT came out, and most people said, "Oh, that's a very interesting way that." So we did summaries like early on, like before I remember like Google or other places. But what we did also was to kind of predict which students do we need to reach out first, because of looking at the past data. So I changed all the names. It was FERPA compliant. I changed all the other information that I had from surveys, but we were also the AI would help in a like class of like 200, 300 students to say, okay, student X, Y, and Z, based off of their survey responses, they're going to be the ones that are going to need your help the most. So I was able to reach out to them early on, kind of like what you're describing with like foresight paired with um, post foresight insight, I guess. And so, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, reinforcement learning is kind of reinforcing that the foresight of something is right or whatever. I've not explained it properly, but that's what machine learning and AI is all about, right? Is making predictions, validating it, and then it strengthens the model's ability to predict stuff. So for sure, and the difference between wisdom and intelligence is, I think, wisdom is your ability to know which problems to solve, whereas intelligence is knowing how to solve the problems that you've been given or that you task yourself with. You know, so like you can have a million things to try and solve. AI can figure out both what to solve and what's most important, but also solve it. And that's the difference between wisdom and intelligence. Right now, we have to ask AI to solve certain problems, but in the future, it should just tell us what problems it thinks it should solve and why. But hopefully, one day it doesn't see us as our own problem. Um, I think we're coming to the end of the episode, so I'm going to move on to the last question, which is basically I ask every single guest on the episode to ask the audience a question to think about. So, what would you question, or what statement would you make to leave everyone with?
Yeah, we talked we've talked about so many great things about from medicine to education to science to sci-fi movies, and um, you know, I I can think of many things about like asking them about education, where let me think about this because I have like so many things maybe I could ask a few. Um, um, if AI is increasingly helping us solve these problems, how do you make sure that you are, as a human in the loop, are staying responsible for deciding which problems are important? And this ties into critical thinking, and if AI starts telling us which is the important one to solve, how do you recognize when it's wrong, or when someone else is making that choice for you? How do you maintain your agency? Those are two questions.
It's a really good one.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what people think of it.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is that not a lot of people have explicitly written it, is that an agent replaces agents that work in agencies. So the agency business model, whichever type it might be, in whichever industry, has agents working there, human agents. And AI agents are uh, both an augmentation and also a replacement for tasks. And tasks make of jobs. And so, these sort of any company that offers agency on behalf of their clients is going to be able to use AI to the benefit, but that's also going to probably shrink the overall market. So yeah, that's an interesting observation from my side. I just want to say thanks a lot for your time on this episode. It's been great, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people think of it.
Thank you so much for having me and asking these great questions. I really like the spontaneity and like the questions you asked and this journey with you. It's been unlike any other podcast, but each podcast is unique. So thanks so much again.